Your competition is evolving, but are you?
Your competition is already transforming. Don't get left behind.
I worked my way up and I'm thinking finally made it here, but I still wasn't happy. A little more empathy, heart-minded consciousness from a leadership perspective. I'm not necessarily my past, and I'm actually not, I worry about the future. There is only the here and now.
The insight that you're providing is very valuable, and I really hope people are paying attention. Your competition is already transforming, so don't get left behind. What if the key to better leadership lies in both cutting-edge tech and ancient practices? Christopher Larsen explains how he fuses the two transformative results. Welcome to the show, Christopher.
Great to be here. Really excited to have some great conversations around these things.
Yeah, it's going to be a great one, and I encourage people to listen to the end because we're going to cover a lot of really interesting things around leadership. So, you're in a position where you're kind of at the intersection of advanced tech and holistic practices, right?
Yes.
So,
yeah.
What inspired you to bring those two like completely different worlds together?
Boy, that's I could spend an hour talking about it, but in reality, back in the 80s, I just start at the beginning and I'll run through it, but loved music and loved jazz and things like that. But there's this computer thing that was coming up in the 80s, and I'm like, that sounds very interesting. So long story short, I went to college, got an electronics engineering degree in computer science. But even before that, I had this ability or this awareness of knowing what things were, and also very philosophical, asking questions about what's the meaning of life. And so that honestly was probably the most exciting part of growing up and moving on over the past few decades. But I was in IT, did programming for IBM, and worked my way up and started focusing on being an executive, and so worked my way up and got to the top, and I'm thinking finally made it here, but I still wasn't happy. And that's, again, the clients I work with, that's kind of where it is. It's like you're all driven to accelerate and be successful by moving up through the ranks and being leaders. And you get there and realize you're still not happy. You've got the money, you've got the wealth, you got, the family, the house, you got all these things, and you're like, it's just not enough, or it just doesn't feel right yet. And so that's the executives or leaders that I work with, helping them go through that process. And again, I looked at I could be a performance coach. I could do, a spiritual coach. I could be, a mind coach, basically. But I knew in my heart that it's really a holistic approach to life. You can't have one without the other. So I always talk about the three-legged stool: mind, body, spirit. Like if one of them's shorter than the other, you're going to fall off. So, but in today's, and we can get into the conversation around back decades ago, it was very much a masculine leadership role that with a lot of control, fear, intimidation stuff. But what's happening in recent years, it's like, boy, my employees are pissed off at me. They don't like me. They're not productive enough. And I'm like, what do I need to do differently? And so that's what's happening now. There's a little more empathy, heart-minded consciousness, from a leadership perspective. And I'm like, that's the area I want to help people with, because, and we can talk about AI later, but it's only going to get worse. So, as a leader, you better figure it out now.
Yeah. One of the things I love about your work with KnowledgeGain is your emphasis on knowledge retention through innovative platforms. So how do holistic principles, though, play a role in knowledge management?
Yeah. And maybe I can talk to you about my 4 pillars of existence, to where knowledge kind of fits in there. There's basically, and it's sort of a technology perspective, but there's data, information, with knowledge and wisdom. So we can look back, in the 50s, you can, assume there was these computers coming up and they were collecting data. And so the human could figure out what kind of information to extract from that, and thereby acquiring knowledge and hopefully wisdom and doing the right thing in the right place. Then the internet comes along and you essentially have unlimited information, too much information, honestly. And so now you have a wealth of that to for the human to understand, from a knowledge perspective. And now with AI coming in place, you are, unfortunately or fortunately, you're in a position where you have unlimited knowledge, and you have to look in from a holistic perspective. What's happening is it's forcing us to go, oh, we can look out, externally in the world, and we're seeing fake news, and we're getting to the point where we don't know if it's truth or not, if it's actual knowledge that I can use. So what's happening is you ultimately have to reflect within oneself. So that's from a mind, body, spirit perspective, as a leader, to like, there's that gut feeling you sometimes have. That's a big part of it, that you have to understand, hey, like, this makes sense or that makes sense. I don't know what decision to make, but if you take some time, and I work, part of my programs work with mindfulness, meditation, breathing exercise, and stuff like that. Take a step back, smell a coffee. Don't, like, if you're not sure about a decision, take, unless a tiger's chasing you, take some time and think about it, and think about it holistically from within yourself and externally, and how it affects others. So that's kind of how I approach it.
So like for most tech executives, embracing ideas like mindfulness and meditation as, holistic things, it seems unconventional to them. So
Mhm.
how do you help them understand the benefits of those practices?
Yeah, and so, one of the things, there's many individuals, many leaders that are not ready for the conversation. So one of the first steps for me in engaging with a client is, are you aware what you're doing isn't working? You're basically stuck in a rut, or you can't accelerate. If you're at that point and you're willing to like try something different or make a change, that's when I engage with them. And one of the first steps, is to spend some time, like I said, with mindfulness meditation. The first step, um, a lot of leaders that I work with are, they look physically fit, healthy and everything, but on the inside, they're just stress and anxiety and like all over the place.
Sounds
So,
familiar.
and then on the spiritual side of the stool, it's like, I honestly don't touch that. That's for more advanced kind of conversations. So the reality is let's talk about the mind and the subconscious and the conscious. And so, what triggers you? What's happening when you are in a meeting and you have to make a decision, and you're angry about this person, or I don't like that person, and you have all this judgment going on in your head, and you can't think straight. And then you start making trigger responses, because ultimately, for the most part, you're built based on a bag of stories. I mean, whatever happened to you in your past, and now you're sitting there going, "This is who I am, and there's nothing more." And that's a recipe for repetition. You'll never get better. You'll never do anything beyond that if into the future. So what I do is we have conversations, think about the past, but like most importantly, take a step back and just listen to your thoughts. That's like step one. What am I thinking? People talk about meditation, and it's like, oh, you just need to calm the mind and not think. I'm like, no, that's great, but the first step is just listen to your thoughts, let them come, let them go. In fact, I even encourage, thank them and just say, oh, that was interesting. Somebody cut me off in driving down the road, and I got pissed off. It's like, huh, am I a bad person? No, it's your subconscious triggered an initial moment of like, oh, and that's all based on repetition from your past. So when you take a moment and step back and say, I'm not necessarily my past, and I'm actually not, I worry about the future, like, oh, I've got a $30 million deal that I have to, finalize and get that across there. Like, the reality is the past and the future don't necessarily exist. There is only the here and now. So when you take a step back, slow down, and try to go to these meetings, or you're driving down the road, try to be in the present moment as much as possible. But it can take a long way without a coach, but you can figure this out on your own as well. But you really need to like take a step back and like think about what you're actually doing and why you're doing it.
Yeah, years ago when I came up with my decentralized A-team method, to help myself, one of the aspects of it is to help communication. And I realized that a strange thing hit me while I guess I should rewind. I had to like go through and look at everything that I was doing. I looked at my communication, I looked at my time management, I looked at everything. And one of the things that jumped out at me about communication was I noticed, like, I'd be, like you mentioned, I'd be in a meeting and there'd be a particular person who just always annoys me for whatever reason. They're just an annoying person. We all have those persons in our life. And they would ask for something, and my initial reaction would just be like, why do I have to deal with this? So I had to start being more intentional about treating everybody the same way. I don't care if you're annoying or not. You're asking for something that's within my scope. I have to answer that within my scope. So I think that's it happens, and I think people need to pay attention to that. But I like to say I really love your stool analogy. The idea that you have 4 legs, on a stool, and if one of them gets cut short, you're going to tip over in that direction. How did you come up with that analogy?
I honestly don't know. Well, okay, so here's the thing is since I was probably 7, I've had these crazy, amazing answers in my head, and I didn't know what was going on. I would, and all through my career, it's like I knew usually the answer in the meeting in the first 5 seconds, or I knew it before. And in recent years, getting into chakras and energy and everything's a vibration. But I started to kind of realize, I think this is my higher self. Like there's a connection from a spiritual perspective that, I can come through. So the tool thing just pops into my head. Now I'm sure someone's expressed it somewhere else and I might have read it somewhere else, but from my perspective, it's like, oh, that's a perfect analogy of what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, because it gives a visual that people can understand. I mean, broken chair leg, you're going to fall over.
Yeah.
So what are some ancient practices you've integrated into your coaching, and how do they complement today's tech-focused strategies?
Yeah. So I think, some of the things, there's several areas, but there's 2 primary focuses. Now we talk about meditation and mindfulness, and that's been around thousands and thousands of years. So that's like one of the key areas that ultimately I want to get to. Now I restructure it when you're dealing with a leader and IT that knows it all, and I'm guilty of that too, like I said. But like you want to like reframe it and say, let's just take, like I talked earlier, take a step back. We'll get to the actual, like the meditation. The goal for meditation is to become aware of being aware. So you want to like understand, like, oh, that's like, I'm more than what I'm, saying right now. I'm more than what I'm doing. So for an IT leader, a technologist, having them think a little bit further. The hard part is it's, just by going into IT or, technology, you're very much materialistic. You really see the world. I mean, back in college, I mean, I'm hooking up probes to an oscilloscope to look at how, and programming an 8086 chip on how it actually works. So it's all very, very physical. So from a technology perspective, a lot of times it's hard to take a step back until you're ready for that. And meditation is one of the key principles. And again, if you, one of the first things you do when you're trying to meditate, like I said, if you want to let the thoughts come and go, but then you just are like inundated with all these thoughts, and it can take a long time. But sometimes you need to introduce something from a physical perspective, which is breathing. Box breathing is one of my favorites. And again, that's an ancient process as well. And that's really breathing in for 4 seconds, holding it 4, exhaling 4, and holding it out for 4. There's many variations, but that's the one I start with. And the other key thing too is that like you have all of the self-help information and all these steps and root processes that you have to follow in order to become a better person. And I think that's crap. You have to listen to yourself. So again, listening it within you, where are you at? Do you want to do Tai Chi? Do you want to do some kind of yoga? I actually practice I call it free chi. Like I know some of the basics around the yoga and I work through those things, but I start listening to my body and start moving in certain ways and holding different poses. And again, that's to me much, much more rewarding.
So what's the first step a leader should take though, if they want to interact, or if they want to merge the holistic practices and technology for personal and team growth?
Yeah, so I would say, yeah, the first step before team growth, it has to come from within. So as we talked about, one of the very first steps is being understand you, want to try, maybe you don't believe in this, maybe woo-woo spiritual stuff, but you're at least willing to try and experiment with that, which is very easy for, leaders, is to say, I wonder what that's like. So the first step is just acknowledge there might be something different that could make me a better person. Once you have spent the time and you literally can get to a point where you're like blissed out through meditation. So if you can practice and get to a point where you're comfortable in your own skin, that's when you want to start reaching out to your teams and others. But I would argue you don't need to just work on something for 6 months and go, okay, now I'm an enlightened being and my team's going to be great. That's not how it works. But you could like find interesting things. And, what I've noticed in my clients, it's like, like we talked earlier, like you go into a meeting and you're just instantly aggravated about a situation or a person. And over time, you start to realize you're not only walking into the meeting and you don't have those subconscious triggers about and judging someone, but you're actually going to the meeting excited to make a difference. So it's like a holistic perspective. You're no longer dreading this 3-hour budget meeting. You're actually going in and go, I'm going to come into this meeting. I'm going to listen more. And that's a key for a leader. Nobody listens enough, and let other people talk, because life, career, and at home is communion. It's communication between individuals. At the end of the day, we're all souls or consciousness talking to each other, finding each other out. And so to go into a meeting and just barrel down and tell everybody what they're going to do isn't very rewarding for yourself or for anyone else. So I find too, enabling them, like let them fail, fail fast, I guess, fail first, but you want to enable and I look at everyone as a consciousness or a soul or someone. Everyone has value. So like I go into meetings or the clients do, and they go into like, how can I help this person? Not just work, but maybe home. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe there's a lot of things you can do. So but if you just go into, like, aha, I got it, I'm going to be nice, I'm going to be loving and caring, and you just go into the meeting like that, that's crap too. At some point, it's really not going to work. The whole positive affirmation and positivity can help temporarily somewhat, but until you actually incorporate that internally into yourself, it has to be rewired in your subconscious to be like, that's kind of who I am. And amazing things happen after that.
You mentioned the importance of listening. And one of the things I've learned from doing interview shows like this is how important it is to listen, because people tune in to see you. They don't really tune in to see me. And so if all I did was talk the whole entire time, they wouldn't be very happy. So I actually tell some of my clients who have trouble with listening to their people, why don't you set up your phone and record yourself interviewing somebody? Do some interviews and watch what happens. Watch how many times you step on what they say or interrupt them, and find your weaknesses through that. And do it several times just so you can see if like maybe I had a bad moment or I wasn't being intentional enough. But it really helps because people think they're listening. I used to say that there's also a difference between listening and hearing. Like some people listen with like this blank stare in their face, and then if you ask them to tell you what you said, they can't, because they didn't really hear what you said. So what do you think is the biggest misconception that executives have around holistic practices?
I would say that it doesn't work. But aside from that, really the biggest hang up, I think, again, is just like making that first step forward. And what you'll find, and my clients find, and I found in my life, is like there's a lot of self-doubt. Like, oh, this, I feel happy, and then, oh wait, no, I'm worried about this. So the misconceptions of the holistic practice, again, is like, I don't know if this is really going to work. There's a bit of a self-doubt. I am who I am over the last 40 years. How can I change? So it's just there's a lot of fear involved with that. And so, and some are, like I said before, some are not ready to make the change. So they're going to continually repeat the patterns from the past and just be who they are until it doesn't work, until they get that door just slightly cracks open and goes, something or some situation. Usually it's traumatic things, which is sad, but you get to a point where where you lose your job or something, or you lost, $100 million. But to prevent that from happening again, like take a step back and like recognize maybe there's a different way to approach this. And I'm going to look outside the box a bit and not have to be so much in control of my team, control of my environment, and just let go. And that's, one of the books I wrote was Letting Go Without Giving Up, not specific to leaders, but for everyone. But just the idea of how scary it is to let go. Like the ego inside you wants to control everything. And that makes it happy. And when you start relinquishing some of that control by letting go, it freaks out. So like there's a slurry of things going on in your head when you start saying, that's, don't sweat the small stuff. It's not a big deal. Now the hard part is people are like, whoa, you're letting go. You don't care. I'm like, no, it's not how that works. I mean, you certainly could feel that way. I'm not, saying that isn't something you might feel, but let go and recognize that you will never, ever, ever control everything in your life. And that also stems into the fear of the unknown, which is a huge part of leaders in everybody's lives of like, I just want the same day. I like to have the things in the place. I like to have these things, and I don't like change. And I'm like, the reality is we're always changing from one. You could look at life, from the now changing into infinite realities and things. So things are always changing, and you can't ever control all of it. So I would suggest finding, as a leader, find one spot where you can kind of let go. Again, an example of a meeting, like you have an answer, what needs to be done. Ask someone, listen to what they're saying, ask them what they think, and then see what see if they come up with. And a lot of times it's wrong, or you might fail. But again, it's the communion with others is the most important thing. So like getting a leader to get past that misconception where they have to own and control everything is probably one of the biggest hurdles.
So if you could upload an ancient practice into the cloud to make it universally accessible, what would it be, and why do you think today's leaders would need it?
Upload into the cloud. There's lots of mindfulness meditation apps. That first and foremost, there's a ton out there on your phone. That would be one of the first things I would do. There's also breathing techniques, breathing apps. I would also do a sleep app. I mean, I touch a lot on mind and spirit, but from a body perspective, the physical aspects, you don't get enough sleep, it's going to wreck your whole day. So like getting a sleep, I have one, on my phone when I go to bed at night, I can like, find out how well I slept. So sleeping super important. So those are some of the technologies that you could put in the cloud. I was initially like, when you said move it in the cloud, I initially was thinking AI. And my master's thesis in metaphysics was on, does AI have a soul? And that was a fascinating year to like work through all of the whole process and stuff. But if you think about it, moving something highly, highly intelligent into the cloud that could help everyone on the planet, and sadly, I mean, it's going to happen. So that's why I say be prepared.
Yeah, no, like that's I actually use a lot of those kinds of apps, for like breathing techniques. Like on the one app on my phone, it reminds me through my watch, okay, it's time to do some breathing. And it's amazing. Like even I have this issue where I'll go to the doctor, if I have to go into a hospital for some reason, my blood pressure rises. And so, first thing they do when you sit down with the doctor, they take your blood pressure and they go, oh my God, your blood pressure is up. So I told one of the nurses one time, like, it just stresses me out when I come in here. So now every time I go in, she makes me sit down, and for 5 minutes, I have to breathe because she wants to see where my blood pressure really is. And it's amazing how just something as simple as focusing on your breathing completely takes your body from like, tense up here to just brings it down. It's quite a surprise to me. So let's say, you mentioned AI and you said that would be something you would have liked to push out to the cloud. Imagine that there's an AI powered simulation and tech executives can experience ancient wisdom firsthand. What practices would you include for them to live?
I mean, I would go through, and it ties into the meditation, but it would go through thinking about the chi energy and the chakras that flow through from your from your root chakra all the way up to third eye and brow, and just like it would be amazing is to have them put on a VR headset and interact with that concept and just have them understand. And I look at the chakras. I talk about like words are a crude way to express what truly is. And when you look at, the definition of the chakras that have been around for thousands and thousands of years, it doesn't necessarily, you can use it as a symbolic representation of the energies, but that would be amazing if you had that in the cloud and they could spend some time, put your VR headset on and have the chakras dancing around. And then you would have some practices. Why don't you try, to like open up your heart chakra, let's talk. And with AI, it would talk, tell me about a past experience, so that's a whole other conversation around coaching and AI. I think it's going to help a lot of people, but at the end of the day, I still come back to, we're going to want to talk to other humans most of the time.
Amazing conversation. I mean, the insight that you're providing is very valuable, and I really hope people are paying attention. But if they have questions, where can they connect with you?
Yeah, used to be on Facebook and Twitter and all those, but I'm trying to back off on the technology ironically. So I'm primarily on my website, knowledgegain.com, and you can reach me out on LinkedIn, CS Larsen 42.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we'll make sure those get on the screen and the notes everywhere. But thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with myself and the listeners today. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it too. Thank you for having me, Mike.
All right. Thanks everybody for being here for another episode of Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge. New episodes every Wednesday, 8 a.m. Pacific time on YouTube and LinkedIn. Hope you have a great week and see you again next week.